Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland and this is Football Talk. It's all about World Cup qualification that happened over the past 3 days. And we also look a little bit forward. But yeah, we look at especially the European qualifiers because that's the stuff that I've been watching the most of. What did Austria do? But also, what did Slovakia do? Beating Germany, handing Germany the first away loss in World Cup qualifying in history. This is a really momentous win that actually has Germany reeling at the moment. And speaking of those two results, they kind of bracket that we saw that the big teams having some trouble many times here. We had England just barely hanging on to a win. We had the same thing going with Croatia. We had the Netherlands, despite being so dominant against Poland, only managing a 1-1 draw, and so on and so on. But then there were also some big wins for some of the bigger teams, and we'll get to those as well. We also go all around the world. We still have quite some action in South America. We know all the fixed qualification spots for South America already, so 3 more teams qualified. Actually, 4 more teams qualified because we had the first qualifier out of Africa. And there will be an emphasis in this episode on what is happening in Africa. We are running through all the groups. Quite some interesting groups in there and quite some big names that might miss out and smaller teams might get in. So really interesting. In Asia, we took a break. However, we know the final groups, but I'm just mentioning that we are not talking about Asia in this one, but we'll talk about CONCACAF because there the second round also got underway, and that's the round where we get 3 more qualifiers for the World Cup as well. So definitely interesting. But let's start this episode in Linz, where Austria took on Cyprus and almost embarrassed themselves. Well, all the hype surrounding the Austrian national team that has been building over the past 2.5 years has this year really received a big dampening because, the results have not all been that great, especially the loss to Serbia. And while in June it was okay. Now you play Cyprus at home, sold out stadium in Linz. And it was an absolute turd of a performance. Cyprus had the better chances. In the first half, they had 2 good chances. One where they hit the post in 2 occasions in the same action. It was an attack where the ball goes onto the post, onto goalie Schlager, again on the post, and then he pats it away, and then there was another shot. Austria in attack, honestly, so confused. I mean, it was crosses, which is not the Austrian way of crossing it. And the only good cross that came in, Arnautovic couldn't get to it because a defender got to it first. And Cyprus, of course, were defending deep. But then on the other side, whenever there was a chance to take a shot, they always tried to play back and find the teammate to put it in, and it never got there. So really, really bad. It was a little bit better in the second half, however, barely better. And then you get an absolute gift from the referee, a VAR penalty. It was an action where Baumgarten is in the box. He barely can get to the ball, and while his foot comes down, a Cypriot player is stepping on the foot. And that's the foul. There was the action was over. The ball was away, but that was the foul. And Sabitzer converts. Yes, they hang on to that win, I think, with some luck. And if you play it out better, you can make it probably 2-0. You had plenty of possession and so on. But this is not a team that is built on possession. And so it was a really, really, really drab performance, I have to say, by Austria. And then highlighted by suddenly another huge hole opening up on the pitch in Linz that had to be stuffed. I mean, everything did not look right. And I honestly feel for Cyprus. If that penalty was given against Austria, I would be mad. They fought well. They really deserved something more out of this game. But it's a 1-0 for Austria. You take the 3 points. This is all you needed in World Cup qualifying. I just want to say, if you take the penalty out of the expected goals, this is a very, very level affair in terms of expected goals. And Austria definitely need to improve when they visit Bosnia in the next game, as Bosnia actually beat San Marino 6-0 away from home. Looks very impressive, especially since San Marino only lost by 4 goals to Austria and Romania. However, when you see kind of the match film, Golinucci got sent off in the 16th minute, a straight red card. And then Tahirovic in the 21st gets the breakthrough. And then the goals came late. unlike Austria, who had the goals early, all in the first 30 minutes, and then stopped it. The goals came late, with Dzeko scoring a brace in the 70th and the 72nd, and then 3 more goals after the 80th minute. So Bosnia still leading this group ahead of Austria with a game more, but with 3 points ahead of Austria. So those are the 2 teams that are still perfect. Romania already at a distance. Cyprus and San Marino don't really have a realistic chance of qualifying, although San Marino could make it into the playoff. Let's look at the other groups and let's go group by group from A all the way to J. I think we have so many groups in there, but we'll start with the big result of this entire round, which is Slovakia beating Germany 2-0, and it was fully deservedly so. Germany might have had more possession and so on, but they were really, really lame up front and very, very open on the back. And it took all until the 42nd minute, and when Strelec finds Hančko, 1-0 for Slovakia, and then Strelec himself in the 55th minute makes it 2-0, and Germany really did not have a good chance of coming back. This was very one-sided. And as I said in the opener, this is the first away loss for Germany in World Cup qualifying. And in the same group, Northern Ireland are actually taking the lead, not Slovakia, with a 3-1 away win at Luxembourg. Well, it's not really a big result, if you ask me, but it was first a penalty that was parried and then Reed taps it in. Dardari actually gets the equalizer for Luxembourg, but then yellow-red card when they were at 2-1 down right after the halftime break. And Devon in the 69th then makes it a 3-1 win for Northern Ireland, who at this moment are first in that group. However, you would think that Slovakia and Germany might be slightly better, but that group suddenly got a whole lot more interesting. Speaking of a whole lot more interesting, I think Group B is probably the tightest of them all here in Europe, and I absolutely love that we have now 4 team groups. It goes very, very, very fast, but Slovenia, Switzerland and Sweden, that's really hard to call, and it was already hard to call between Slovenia and Sweden. Sweden twice had the lead through Elanga and Ajari in the 73rd minute, however in the 90th minute Potnik gets the equalizer when Lovric right after half already equalized for the first time for Slovenia. But it was Switzerland that really put down a marker, and we know that goal difference is the first tiebreaker, and they really took Kosovo to the sword in the first half. Akanji, Embolo, Widmer and Embolo again scoring 4 goals between the 22nd and the 45th. Then it was a little bit disappointing that no more goals came for Switzerland, but with 4-0 Switzerland really put down the first marker in this group, and I would actually favor Switzerland to qualify from this group. But now they have to play the better teams in this group. Much was expected from the matchup between Denmark and Scotland. However, it ended in a 0-0 draw, so it was Greece who actually put down the first marker, also with a huge score and a 5-1 over Belarus, 4-0 already half time. Karasetas, Pavlidis, Bakasetas and Kurbelis scoring the 4 goals. Zolis actually made it 5 before a penalty in the 72nd minute actually made it a 5-1 score. So Greece really putting themselves in a very good position. Goal difference is already working, and I have a feeling this group that Denmark might actually miss out, and it's between Greece and Scotland. But that's just an inkling early on in the qualification process. When was actually the last time we said good things about Iceland? Iceland started qualification with a 5-0 over Azerbaijan. That is not something I saw coming. Paulsen just before halftime put them into lead in the second half. Johannesson scores a brace. Gudmundsson and Hlinson make it a proper scoreline. However, it was all about Ukraine taking on France, and France were dominant, I would say, for the first hour of the game. Had a lead through Olise or in the 10th minute, assist by Barcola. But then it got shaky. There was a clearance on the line. There was a header, I think, onto the post. So late on, it was really France hanging on to that one. But then Germany finds Mbappé and 2-0, and the French are off and running, still behind Iceland, but they probably mastered their toughest test in this group. Another big match that was on my radar, maybe underrated in that sense, was Georgia taking on Turkey. However, this very quickly went the wrong way. Mert Mulder in the 3rd minute already opening the scoring, being assisted by Arda Güler and Aktürkoğlu in the 41st minute. As Georgia tried to get back into the game, made it 2-0, almost killing Galen. Aktürkoğlu again scores in the 52nd. However, then Davutashvili pulls one back 10 minutes later, and so game kind of on. You got the crowd back in, then Yilmaz is sent off for a red card. Also Willy Sagnol got sent off, and so Turkey were hanging on, and very late on they concede another one. However, it is enough to get the 3 points. The goal came through Kvaratskhelia in garbage time, already 8th minute of stoppage time, and there were still some minutes being played, but in the end Turkey hang on to really important 3 points. However, Spain demonstrated they are and will be the class in this group. Going to Bulgaria, yes, a Bulgaria team that is reeling, but it was a full house in Sofia. However, after 5 minutes already, Oyarzabal gets the breakthrough, Kukureya in the 30th and Merino in the 38th minute, 3-0, and just before halftime, there were plenty of chances for Spain to open up the scoring. Yes, Bulgaria, when it was 1-0, had a chance where they hit the post. It was a deflected shot that could have opened it up, but then they were actually lucky to not lose by more. Spain definitely shut it down in the second half, and it's only a 3-0 win. But you know, Spain will probably do very well in this group. As do their Iberian neighbors, Portugal, going to Armenia, winning 5-0. This is how you do it. And who scores the goals? Well, there was a brace by Joao Felix, now playing in Saudi Arabia, and by Cristiano Ronaldo, also of course playing in Saudi Arabia. And I'm wondering, does this have anything to do? I mean, Joao Felix scoring a brace for Portugal. He was horrible for Milan, honestly. But you know, 5-0, it's all about that we need to talk. And of course, Cristiano Ronaldo still being on the score sheet, even at his advanced age, shows he can make the goals. However, I always wonder, will he do it against bigger opponents? This is a little bit of a worry. We saw in the Nations League final, he put in a shift, did actually well there, but then he also got tired. So, you know, that's always a discussion about big Cristiano. However, a matchup that I had my eye on in this group was Ireland taking on Hungary. And very early on, this took the turn towards Hungary. Varga already in the 2nd minute and Shala in the 15th minute opened up a 2-0 lead. Ireland really having a hard time getting back in the game. And I think before halftime, Hungary probably should have made it 3 as well. Evan Ferguson, right after half, pulls one back, and then Shala is sent off for a straight red card, and that actually got Ireland back into the game. There was then attack after attack to the Hungarian goal, but it was then late on, Ida in the 93rd minute that gets the equalizer. Definitely points dropped for Hungary, because Hungary, in order to challenge Portugal, you would have needed to pick up that 1 point. Let's see what it will do for Ireland. Okay, let's go to the bigger groups that already had some games played. We had Malta getting a 1-1 draw at Lithuania. They actually had a lead in the 83rd minute, but then a player sent off and a penalty late on gives Lithuania the point. But it was all about the Dutch playing against Poland, and honestly, they should have led by way more than just a 1 goal. But Denzel Dumfries in the 28th minute. Plenty of chances, loads of pressure. I mean, Poland was not really on the field, and more of that actually in the second half. However, then Poland, with some changes around the 71st minute, got a little bit more solid. But I still had the feeling that the Dutch will win this one. Probably should have added a second one. This was always the lingering doubt there, and then it came as it comes. The ball comes to Matty Cash, yes, a very Polish name, and he just unleashes a rocket, and it goes into the net. And so Poland hang on or grab a point, which leaves the group relatively open. I mean, we have 3 teams up top with 7 points. Of course, the Dutch have a game less and should still be considered the big favorites. But it was definitely points drop for the Dutch. In Group I, Norway had a game off, so it was Italy having to make up the goal difference very much. They had -12 in comparison to Norway, and they then played Estonia at home. On paper, probably the easiest opponent, Gennaro Gattuso being now the new coach of the Azzurri. And they created chance after chance after chance, but it was really a game where you felt that they have a hard time breaking them down. First half ended only 0-0, with Heen having actually a really good match in goal. However, Moise Kean opens up the scoring in the 58th minute, and then the floodgates open. Retegi working really hard, Moise Kean working really hard, and Retegi then gets his fully deserved goal in the 69th minute. Raspadori had meanwhile come on as well. Cisbes Politano 2 minutes later, 3-0. And then in garbage time, Retegi adds a second one, and Bastoni also gets in. So 5-0 is probably what you would have expected from that game. Maybe Italy could have scored more goals, because goal difference will become crucial. You need to be on the last match day. Norway at home, but you also need to add goals, and maybe so the 5-0, despite being a good result, maybe might be too little. We gotta see. At the same time, Israel also put on the goals. Goal difference could become an issue in this group because Norway has already been running away. They beat Moldova away from home 4-0. So that's also... Israel is still in the running. However, I think Norway has to be considered the huge favorite in this group. In Group J, Wales got a very important 1-0 win at Kazakhstan that keeps them just about in the running. But it is Belgium who are the favorites in this group, despite only sitting in third spot at the moment. However, 2 games less than Wales, and I think they've already beaten Wales as well. It was a 6-0 win for Belgium in Liechtenstein, so... good news out of Belgium. De Kuyper in the 29th minute opened the scoring, and then in the second half it was really when the floodgates opened. Tielemans, Terté, De Bruyne, Tielemans and Fofana scoring 5 more. With no goal difference is important, but points are more important as well. But Belgium looking good at the moment. In Group K, Serbia also stay in the running and stay unbeaten thanks to a 1-0 away win at Latvia. Nothing really to talk home about, but Vlahovic again scoring an important goal. And so they may stay in contention with England, who have now 4 games, 4 wins, but again an absolute awful game that was decided by Garcia own goal in the 25th minute and Declan Rice scoring in the 67th. But England still look very anemic. However, they have enough quality to get enough points, and so they will probably win this group quite easily. And same thing should be true for Croatia. Yes, sitting 3 points behind the Czechs at the moment, but getting a 1-0, a narrow 1-0 at the Faroe Islands. That was a steep test. Kramaric scoring in the 31st minute, but they have 2 games less than the Czechs, who actually keep themselves in the running. Yes, they already lost big at Croatia, so I don't have a real hope for Czechs to qualify directly. But Červ early and Černý late, getting the 2 goals in a 2-0 away win at Montenegro. We also have to look at the upcoming games. Already in the day that post Sunday, we have Germany on a bounce-back mission against Northern Ireland. Pretty big. We also have Turkey against Spain. This is probably the stiffest test for Spain. So if there's some hope for anyone else but Spain, that would be the one. We have also Poland against Finland. Poland could put some pressure on the Dutch, I would say, who have to play in Lithuania. They play first, so I guess they should get the 3 points there. Then on Monday, we have again Switzerland, Slovenia. I think it's the most interesting game in there. Israel, Italy. It's not an easy one, honestly, because Italy need to get the points, and Israel, have shown that they can score. And then on Tuesday, we end it all. France take on Iceland. I guess they will then be the leaders, but it's for me all about Bosnia against Austria. But there's also Hungary against Portugal. Hungary beat Portugal. That could open up the group. And Serbia hosting England. Yeah, I think Tuesday, that's the pretty good match day to watch. Well, I want to start the world portion of this episode in South America, where 3 more teams have qualified in Colombia, Uruguay and Paraguay. However, all the news coming out of it was, of course, Lionel Messi, who potentially had his last home game in World Cup qualifying in an Argentina shirt. He even had his kids out there and had some tears in the build-up. However, he was still lethal against Venezuela. Venezuela team that was actually fighting to stay in a direct qualification race. However, they lose 3-0 and Lionel Messi score, of course, 2 goals in the process, meaning that Venezuela really had to have other results falling in their way if they were hoping to qualify for the first time directly for a World Cup. However, it was not meant to be, as we already know. We had Colombia getting a 3-0 home win over Bolivia, another team that is still in the race for the playoff spot, with James Rodriguez being the huge star there, scoring the opening goal, Cordoba and Quintero adding 2 more, Luis Diaz assisting the 3rd goal. Paraguay only a 0-0 against Ecuador, a team that already had qualified, so the 2 outsiders. However, that single point was enough for Paraguay to qualify for the World Cup again, first time since 2010, so wild celebrations ensue. Of course, they will be already at the World Cup in 2030 as well, so 2 consecutive World Cup appearances for Paraguay. And then Uruguay downed any chances of Peru that were already very, very slim, qualifying or at least going to play a spot by winning 3-0 at home, qualifying themselves. Aguirre opening the scoring there, Rasqueta 58th minute doubling it up, and then Viñas in the 80th minute making it a very very resounding score. And this is a Uruguay team that does not have the big names that we had previously, so that makes that actually quite intriguing. And lastly, Carlo Ancelotti was allowed to test a little bit new players in a 3-0 home win over last place Chile, Estevao, and then played on Lucas Paquetá and Bruno Guimaraes, adding 2 more goals. So yeah, Brazil slowly finding their feet under Carlo Ancelotti. If we look at the upcoming games, I mean, it's all about the playoff spot because the direct qualification spots are already decided. So it comes down to Venezuela against Colombia. That is a rivalry. With a win, Venezuela is definitely in. However, Bolivia also hosts Brazil. So not necessarily straightforward. However, Brazil going to the altitude, maybe playing a B squad as well. So Venezuela better get the points against Colombia. Otherwise, Bolivia will go to the intercontinental playoff. In CONCACAF, we had the start to the second group stage, where 3 direct qualification spots for the World Cup are given out, but it was a relatively slow start. We had in Group A, El Salvador getting a win over Guatemala, whereas Panama only got a draw at Suriname. Still, Panama the favorites to move on from the first group. In the second group, Jamaica got a huge 4-0 win over Bermuda, whereas Curacao and Trinidad and Tobago only play out a goalless draw. And then it's all square in the third group, where Costa Rica only managed a 1-1 against Nicaragua and Honduras only as 0-0 against Haiti. And then let's run through the wonderful world of African qualifiers. So much going on, but most groups already have a very clear favorite, like Group A with Egypt 95% qualifying. Yes, Burkina Faso keep themselves alive in the race for one of the 4 playoff spots with a 6-0 away win at Djibouti. However, this was hugely helped by a straight red card in 10th minute for Djibouti and everything else thereafter. By halftime, it was 4-0, and Ouattara even missed a penalty for Burkina Faso in the 13th minute as well. So really one-sided stuff for Burkina Faso, who do a lot for their goal difference. But Egypt, 2 penalties, Mohamed Salah and Omar Marmoush scoring in the first half very late in there to get a 2-0 win over Ethiopia. They are very close to qualifying, having a 5-point lead with 3 games to go. So it looks like Egypt is at the World Cup already. In Group B, the DRC kept their chances alive with a 4-1 away win over South Sudan, who are the last place team, so putting a lot of pressure on Senegal as well. Bakambu opening scoring with a brace, and then Mbuku and Wissa adding 2 more before South Sudan pull one back. However, Senegal get a pretty huge win over Sudan. Sudan were table toppers for quite a while in this group, with Koulibaly and Sarr scoring in the first half, but however, they are now 1 point behind the DRC as well. So this group is going to go down to the wire, and I think it will be between the DRC and Senegal. I think Sudan are finally hitting a little bit the skids, but they're still in it. However, outsiders in that group, although it would be a great story. A great story is definitely what South Africa are doing. They get a 3-0 away win at Lesotho with Ngota, Foster and Apollis scoring the 3 goals, and they look set to qualify to the World Cup, whereas the other 2 teams behind them, Benin and Nigeria, only get 1-0 wins. However, they still enjoy a very comfortable 5-point lead over Benin, and Nigeria really need to beat South Africa and then hope that South Africa slip up another time, and also that the results against Benin fall their way. So it's very likely that Nigeria will not be at next year's World Cup. And given the talent that is in that Nigeria squad, that would be a real stunner. Their eternal rivals Cameroon are in a much better position. However, they also have a little bit of an uphill battle because Cape Verde got a 2-0 away win at Mauritius, and Cameroon have beaten Cape Verde 4-1 at home, but it goes down to the wire late on because Cape Verde will host Cameroon probably for the decisive spots. Cameroon, meanwhile, keeps steady 3-0 home win over Eswatini, and so it's still a point behind Cape Verde, with the 3 draws really costing Cameroon as they are still unbeaten. The first team from Africa to qualify is of course Morocco with a 5-0 home win over Niger in a very weird group where Eritrea has already been eliminated, but it's still not clear if second place will make it to the playoff or not, or maybe is in contention. That is still yet to be decided, and I find it rather weird. But it was started early. Goumet got a yellow red in the 26th minute, and from then on it was all Morocco. Sabari scoring a brace in the first of El Kawi, Igaman and Ouanahi securing the spot in the United States for Morocco. Gabon kept things interesting with a 4-0 away win at the Seychelles, with Bouanga scoring a hat-trick in the first half, but it is the Côte d'Ivoire that are the big favorites, but only a 1-0 home win over Burundi, with Bayo scoring already in the 3rd minute, and not more goals. Goal difference does count, although Côte d'Ivoire still enjoy a good lead in that one, and a 1-point lead over Gabon. Two more teams that look very set on qualifying: Algeria with a 3-1 home win over Botswana, really leading in this group with 6 points, and probably with a win they are already qualified next time. And even better it looks for Tunisia, who also got a rather easy 3-0 home win over Liberia and are the class of their group. Very interesting, of course, is still Group I, where Ghana dropped points at last place Chad, and so opening up a little bit the door for the teams behind them, with Madagascar getting a win, but also Mali still very much in contention there. So that group is tight. Ghana still the favorites though. So those were my thoughts and observations onto World Cup qualifying. We're getting closer to a humongous World Cup. I'm not sure how much I'm looking forward to that one. It's the first time that I'm not looking forward to a World Cup, although qualifying, I have to say, is at least quite interesting. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought about the results. Do you agree with me that some of the big teams really were struggling? And was it the last time we saw Messi in an Argentina shirt at home? I mean, it seemed like, will he play at the World Cup? I would think so, but yeah, let's see about all that. In any case, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment, leave a positive review on this episode. Also, please leave me a subscription. It will really help this channel, and I will talk to you soon with more things in my soccer universe. Bye!